She always thought that money could buy everything in this world. Until one day, she had a story. Muhan, she really liked him. But she didn't know if he liked her. He will give her an answer tomorrow during her birthday party, Muhan said. However, after her confession, he disappeared. She tried to find him for a while. Miss, there is no Muhan on the guest list, and they doubt that such a person exists in principle. She tried to find any information about him, but it was all in vain. She didn't realize it was some kind of joke. How could a person go missing? He was, until one day he showed up. Today they came here specially to interview the owner of the company. This virtual detective game developed by the company has reached the peak of popularity. So the owner of Forgotten Dream World is her boyfriend. No one had ever humiliated her like that before. She was angry, but yet she still wanted an answer. Again and again, immersed in the illusions he'd created, she needed to go through the script for a happy ending, or the game would never end, and the answers she was trying to find, the secrets Muhan kept among all the worlds of forgotten dreams, would all be revealed to her. One day, on one of the gentle days of winter, there was to be a murder in the mansion, a common occurrence in this scenario. The girl running from the room and screaming, "The chapter system should have been over by now." The girl lying out of the room was playing the role of the Lady of the Mountain Mansion, Idaho Loman. As she was running, she tumbled over something and fell, and naturally a guy caught up with her saying, "Still trying to escape from here, miss?" The guy had handcuffs in his hands. Loman fought back and shouted, "Don't touch her, don't come any closer. What makes you think he wants to kill you?" The guy's role was butler of the Mountain Mansion. Well, just wanted to put that collar on her. Then when he was able to put the collar on her, he approached her and said, "Stay with him forever, his Lolo." Thinking about it, now she was ready to give all her money to meet him one more time. She wanted too much. Her name is Loman. She is 18 years old, and she is studying in her second year. She is lucky because she is very rich, and she can get anything she wants. For example, have you found the guy she was looking for yet? Loman asked. "Oh, our sweet daughter, you mustn't think of him now," said her father. "You better eat something yummy first, and then Daddy will find you as many handsome boys as you want." "I don't want to," shouted the girl. "You don't understand her at all. She'd rather go." "But she didn't get home until this morning," shouted the father. "Come home early." Mister, maybe a guy named Muhan, who is wanted by the fire, just didn't have time to tell the guy that he just father interrupted and said, "Quiet, don't say anything. It's not like it's an excuse for a hunger strike. His little girl, we have no choice but to honor her request," said father. A few hours later, Loman went for a walk, and as she wandered the streets, she heard the news from the screens on the storefronts. Over the past 2 years, a fully immersive virtual world game has gained popularity. Players can not only live the life of a character, but also experience it physically, accompanied with stunning visuals. Immersive virtual world. When did this manage to gain popularity? Thought Loman. Why hadn't she seen commercials with games like this before? They managed to interview one of the directors, and also the writer of the game, who graduated from one of the country's elite universities. Let's welcome him. Loman looked up at the screen and saw him. The very guy, her boyfriend. The one she had been looking for so long. Mr. Muhan, founder and owner of Forgotten Dream World. This is the main program where all the scripts are kept. Interviewing Mr. Muhan. The player can immerse himself in any story and choose his role. He can also change the course of the story. Traveling throughout the virtual world and exploring the local culture, he said, invites you into a world of forgotten dreams. Muhan, it's him. All the memories of him came up in front of the girl's eyes. She was very hurt and confused, and she wanted answers from him. As it was a year ago, he was the first to hold out his hand to her and tell her that today he was her tutor, young Miss. In her freshman year, she failed 4 exams, so her father hired her a private tutor, Muhan, a computer genius that jumped several grades ahead and got into the best university in the country. He was popular among all the students. This guy is incredibly handsome and intelligent. "Young miss, if you get everything you want, what about your knowledge?" Muhan showed a notebook with Loman's grades, but his character leaves a lot to be desired. He may not show his feelings and emotions, but she's sure he'll open up to her. In her ridiculous dreams, she imagined them together, writing their perfect love story. She loved spending time with him. Muhan, she liked him a lot, but she didn't know if he liked her. He'll give her an answer tomorrow during her birthday party, he told her for the last time that day. Without an emotional comma, Muhan smiled at her. He had already prepared a present for her, miss. But after that day it was as if he vanished. Loman tried to find him. She asked everyone, the woman who worked in the house, but she told her that she had been working for more than 10 years, but had never heard of any Muhan. Also, her father said he didn't hire any tutor. Maybe she has been putting a lot of pressure on herself these days. Everyone told her that there was no such person, as if they were all conspiring. It was like he was just out of this world, like someone's joke. But those memories seemed so real to her. We go back to the present when Loman saw him in the window of a screen that was showing the news. She just screamed. She knew she hadn't made him up. He couldn't be a real person just disappearing, Loman told herself. She stood like a gawker in front of a big screen in the middle of the street and talked to herself. Had he really planned all this and run away after all these years? A fruitless search, and here he was. Apparently he was having a lot of fun. It's been a long time since anyone's done that to her. The world of forgotten dreams. Yes, she's coming. She'll finally get all the answers from it this time, Loman said angrily. So Loman came to their office or store, and still unclear going into the room, she was very surprised, saying, Han, did he seriously create something like this? She couldn't even believe it. It looks rather plain and boring. She was hoping there would be something more interesting. Welcome to your visit. Hearing the voice but not yet seeing whose it was, Loman turned around happily. And the mommy monster screams. And she runs away from him all over the room, and the monster, so to speak, flies after her and says, "Must be a first-time guest, dear." When the girl and the creature had had enough of running around, they finally sat down and were able to talk quietly. The creature was a cat in the form of a grown man, but the face, or rather the muzzle, was that of a cat. He apologizes for scaring her. His name is Dream. He is in charge of the host program that stores all the scripts. A virtual character and popular agent for the company. If you book today, you can go through all the scenarios, he said. You liked the description of this book. The book was called Hidden Secrets, and the author is a famous writer. It's too boring. Find something more interesting, said the girl. All right, whatever you say, replied the cat. How demanding, just like a master. Wait a minute, said Loman. Do you know Muhan? She needs to meet him, said the girl. Literally a minute later, the cat brought out a new book and threw it on the table. The book said, A Collection of Untitled Plays by Muhan, produced by Forgotten Dream World. Loman took the book in her hands and said, This is it. Through it I can see Mohan. But the cat said, Wait, this book, so far I mean to say, probably not ready. But the girl didn't have time to hear him through and opened this book. When she opened it, the leaves began to turn over on their own at a great speed, as if a system were being triggered. Did you say something? The girl asked. The cat said, Did you open it? At the same instant, some sort of alarm sounded and said that there was an error in running the script. The girl was swept up in the air and began to float. The book is floating, the girl she asks. What's going on? The program began to say, Launch complete, beginning of the first scenario, role assignment. The floor is disappearing, the girl screamed. No, it's a game launch. She's being carried away somewhere. She's like she's falling. Got a new role? Lady of the Mountain Mansion. Youth has some kind of strange feeling. She's got a very dark one. Wait, that was the curtain that said, Murder at the Mountain Mansion, Act 1 Youth, produced by Forgotten Dream World, by Muhan. Wake up, girl, she heard a voice say. And who is it? She said. Trying to open her eyes, she sees some guy in front of her. Well, I can't see very well yet, it's all blurry. Awake at last, little miss, said the girl's boyfriend. When she saw this guy, she shouted, Muhan, it's really him! She rushed into his arms and hugged him so tightly, but then something incomprehensible happened. This is a touching scene in the story, where the protagonist throws herself into the main character's arms after they meet years later. In fact, it can be quite dark. It's the same girl trying to wake up again, opening her eyes. She sees a beautiful room in front of her. Where it was she couldn't figure out. She heard a voice. Ah, miss, you're finally awake. You fainted suddenly. It was the maid who had entered the room and saw Miss waking up. We need to report this to the master immediately, young mistress. She would be back in a flash and ran off so fast that the girl had no time to ask her, Wait, who was the master? That fellow, thought the girl. I wonder who he is, and the speed of the maids here really freaks her out. She got out of bed, threw her blouse on, and decided to look around to see where she was and what was going on. When she went to the mirror, she saw that she had gotten very small and looked exactly like she did when she was a child. While our heroine was admiring herself in the mirror, a cat's paw came out of the picture and called to her. "Miss," said the cat. When the girl turned around, she saw the cat and said, "Oh, Dream." The cat replied, "You started going through the scenario without his consent, but luckily for you, the plot here is pretty light." She had just seen with Mohan. How could he have written this story? She grabs the cat and starts shaking him and dragging him on top of her out of this painting. She screams at him now, but the cat has magical properties. He snapped his finger and said, "Miss, calm down." She should first let him introduce her to the history of the current scenario. Sit back and listen. Opening this book, the cat began to read. You are the 14-year-old lady of the mountain mansion. Your parents made a prenuptial agreement stating that you will be betrothed to your first love as soon as you turn 18. You will marry him. But unfortunately, one girl from the village with a pure soul, the true protagonist of this story, will appear. You started abusing her harshly. People said you were doing it because of your jealousy, covering yourself with cautionary tales. But no one had the courage to condemn the noble lady. After what happened, your fiancé asked that the prenuptial agreement be dissolved. What is this nonsense? Is she playing the part of the main villain or something? The girl shouted. A few years later, a young gentleman will walk the girl down the aisle. However, on their wedding day, there will be a brutal murder at the mansion. So your task will be quite simple. To prevent the murder from being committed, the cat said. She doesn't want to play this nonsense. How does she get out of here? The cat replied, Miss, because you started the scenario without host's consent, you won't be able to get out of it until you go through the scenario for the happy ending. Otherwise, you'll just stay here forever. What the girl shouted. What do you mean, forever? Don't worry, you're handling everything just fine so far. Cat snapped his fingers and activated a plot prompt for the character. You and your role are the lady of the mountain mansion. Your name is Loman. The cat said he had to go and began to disappear from the picture. But the girl shouted, Stop! Will you at least tell me who the murderer is? That's all the cat had time to say, because someone was already coming into the room. With your superior deduction, you will easily solve the murderer. And he was gone. A guy walked into the room, good-looking, blonde hair, and he had one hand behind his back. It seemed very suspicious to Loman. What? Who is it? Came to her so quickly. And what is he holding behind his back? Could it be a knife? The girl thought. The boy headed toward her sharply, that she was frightened, and wearing a little deflected. She said quietly, Save me. But the guy held out a bouquet of flowers to her. He said apparently she didn't take much of a hit, as the maid informed him. Post-scriptum, by the way. The other characters don't see the cat. The boy threw this bunch of flowers at Loman with all his might, and he said, This is your karma for all the lowliness and humiliation over others. He hopes she will remember it for a long time. Somehow Loman sees a small plaque. Near this boy, this plaque says, Role, Young Master. She thought, can she really see the roles of other characters? So this boy is her fiancé? Role, Young Miss. Young Miss had a lover. Their parents arranged their engagement at an early age. They were the perfect couple. Until one day a young gentleman met a girl from the village. Yeah, she's heard that one before, Loman said with a wave of her hand. Simply put, she's the main villain in this story. She gets it all. Well, since she's a villain, Loman picked up this bouquet of flowers and quite briefly thought. She throws this bouquet of flowers in this boy's face and says, You can have them, but give them to your new bride. The guy was a little taken aback by what had happened. He didn't expect such actions at all. How dare she act like that to him? Apologize now! He grabbed her arm. I'll ask you not to forget that this marriage is good for both our families, the boy said. Who is he that she should obey his orders? Said Loman. She had never allowed herself to be so disgusted with herself. Loman stood up and said to Dream, She wants him to remove this character from the script. A cat paw appeared and waved and replied, Unfortunately, it's out of his power. He can only monitor the progress of the script. And Paw also said that if you couldn't morally influence the killer before the final act, your wedding would still take place. Ha ha, Loman replied. In the final act, it's your wedding. So unless you affect the killer in any way, you'll just follow the basic script. I wish you luck. And the paw disappeared. You're so insufferable. He had a much better opinion of her, the boy said. He swung at her and wanted to hit her, telling her that now she was going to pay for all her abuse of him. Loman stood motionless and was already ready to take the blow from him. But he was intercepted by a guy who got there just in time. He says you, young miss, asked to remove yourself by grabbing the arm of an obnoxious hero. He apologizes and says to follow him. Well, that's him, said our boy brawler. We can do without his help. He turned and walked away, slamming the door behind him. Only Mukon and Loman remained in the room. They stood silent and did not even move. And then, finally, the boy spoke. Young miss, he's glad you're feeling better. Stepping closer to her, he added, he has prepared some refreshments for you. He hopes you like them very much. Since our heroine can see rolls, there was also a sign above Muhan that read, Roll Butler of the Mountain Mansion. There is little resemblance to real people in this story. The butler asked, Did you see something? Looking at him so intently. But 6 years later, someone kills everyone in the mansion. The man who stood in front of her and said, Miss, did you see something? Turned out to be a killer in the future. He's gonna kill her. So silly. It's obviously the same person, only now he looks younger. For a moment she felt something strange between them. The butler clapped his hands and Loman came to her senses. Even with his bad temper, he looks like him, she thought. He turned around and walked the other way, saying that he wouldn't bother her anymore then. Let her rest. But Loman couldn't take it again. She couldn't just let him go all the time. She shouted, Stop! Don't go away! They finally met! And tried to grab his hand. She won't let him get away. She just found him after all these years and he wants to run away from her again. Looking into his eyes, the boy didn't react in any way. She wondered why he didn't react to her words. He replied that he was always at the mansion and took her hand away. He doesn't often get a chance to see you, young miss, and started to walk away again. But Loman cried out. She was overly emotional today. He shouldn't pretend like he doesn't know her, and she understood. He just has a guilty conscience. Well, she's gonna give him a chance to make amends. Be generous and merciful today. As soon as she said those words, there was a loud squeak in her voice. What's that voice? She said. Oh, her head. And the voice said, The player is forbidden to mention events that took place in reality. Loman grabbed her head. It hurts so bad, she screamed. The butler turned around and said, Young miss, what's wrong with you? The voice in the girl's head said, Yes, punishment. Seconds to go. The countdown began. The butler leaned over and asked, Not feeling well again? And the maid looks out from around the corner and sees the girl clutching her head. The maid rushes to take offense at the young miss and shouts, She's back already! The maid said, Dear butler, a guest has come to make an appointment. Please inform the master. The butler replied that he understood, and please take care of young miss, and left. Time for the penalty expired, came a voice in the girl's head. Ugh, her head, she said. That hurts so bad. Miss, are you all right? The maid asked. You shouldn't be so close to that butler, he's so creepy. Here comes new trouble, thought the Loman girl, however. Why does she have such an opinion of Muhan? And decided to ask her. But why? Who is he? She must have forgotten. After that blow to the head. Tell her something about him, Loman asked. The maid said she didn't know how true the story was, and thinking about it, she began to tell it. But she had heard that a gentleman had found him among a mountain of corpses, then brought him to the mansion. He has snake eyes. Many have seen the cruelty he inflicts on animals, and there are rumors that he has killed people. So if you get too close to him, something very bad might happen, the maid said. Just act like you always have, don't get close to him. You don't cross paths that often in this life. The world in this scenario doesn't have a story that could belong to just the two of them. Evening came. Lohan secluded herself in her room, taking the picture of the cat and shaking it, afraid to even move. He doesn't want to explain anything to her, she told the picture. Why there are people in this story that she knows in real life, and now she's talking about his creator, if anything. And finally the cat replied, Miss, he really doesn't know. He is simply the host of the program responsible for storing the script. He is uniquely your host. However, he does have information. that the appearance of characters is generated according to the appearance of players. If there was no such player, the NPC model created by the developer is taken. Right now it's not so important whether the butler is real or not. Your goal at the moment is to prevent a murder in the mansion, the cat said. She doesn't argue that it's important, Loman replied. But she had spent so much time searching for him. That's why she was in this situation now. She's imagined their meeting countless times. Her fear is what she most doesn't want. To be the one who was so eagerly awaiting their meeting. If he didn't tell her directly, she'd just rip out his brazen foxtail. It's definitely him, not some NPC, the cat said. Dream, the assignment you need to do is done, and that's it. Okay, you'll see. Give her some time and she'll make him suffer. The next morning after waking up, Immerse opened her eyes in her soft bed. The bed seemed very huge to her, surrounded by 80 maids with towels and combs. I wonder why they all look the same, thought the girl. One by one I'm bringing the young miss up to speed. You're a hectic hour-long carriage ride, and a perfect breakfast in the luxurious dining room. Young miss, you need to eat more! Jumping out of the carriage, the girl shouted, I don't want any! All those maids had soaped her face that it still hurt. Whoever thought of writing such a plot? She thought. And anyway, she doesn't want to endure that kind of pain 996 times, damn it. Walking into her manor, Loman saw Muhan, the butler, coming up the steps. She shouted, Hey, wait! Wait, if it's really him, she won't have to go through this game. And at that same instant, 80 servants were just about to begin their morning cleaning. Loman tried to get through them, but they said to her, Young miss, let me pass. And the butler fled, Loman not having time to catch up with him. In the garden, the girl decided to take a walk. There was a small lake with fish swimming in it. Loman grabbed one, Ruby, and came up with an interesting plan. He reminds us that Muhan hates fish and uses them for testing. Just as he approached her, the butler's voice rang out. Mr. Butler, a guest is already waiting for you at the main gate. Good. He'll be right over, said the butler. Loman's plan had failed. She would have to think of something else. The girl got a rope and came up with a new plan. Luckily, he had taken a roundabout route and had not yet reached the main gate. Now she would catch him by pulling the rope from one side to the other. Well, once again, the butler tricked her. He jumped out of the window, saying, I beg your pardon, he's late, and ran. Once again, he didn't fall for the trap from Loman, and all attempts failed again and again. He kept going around or jumping out. The girl kept losing. It seemed to her as if there was an unknown force that kept her from approaching him. No, it's not. It's all about the scenario itself. There can't be anything between them. They're not meant to meet, Loman pondered. As she stood there contemplating how to play the plot, her fiancé comes up behind her. The guy is all wet and very angry. He asks her what she's been doing all morning. With that, he starts to remember everything she did to him a little earlier. First, while he was drinking tea, and she brought it back to him with a fish, while he went and got another cup so he could drink his tea in peace a second time. But it didn't. Walking, hooked through the rope she held out. He couldn't figure out when this was going to end. The rude girl had decided to play a joke on him. He would definitely teach her a lesson today, reaching out to her from behind. He probably wanted to grab her hair, but the Loman girl turned around and looked at him with adorable eyes. Anything can be accomplished. Her fiancé saw that look of hers and stiffened himself. Sparks ran between them like love at first sight, and he changed his mind about hitting her or grabbing her by the hair. He held out his hand, which had a handkerchief in it, and said, Here. Loman said she's not crying and let him keep that handkerchief because it looks God's. And why is he still in her mansion? How annoying she is. At the same time, someone sits in the carriage and peeks and eavesdrops on Loman and her fiancé. Quickening sat a butler covered with a sheet, and some young man beside him. The young man said, What's the matter, rascal? Wasn't it little Miss and the master who were shouting just now? We need to talk to the master about Miss's behavior, and her reputation is getting worse and worse. However, he spent a great deal of time and money to hire you, born in the north, with a peerless talent for killing, as if granted by heaven. You can use the opportunity to get rid of pesky little insects, said this stranger. The butler tapped this unfamiliar guest with a stick and said, We apologize, honored guest. You must have made a mistake. You should cover your mouth in case some insect flies in. Young miss. Today you braided your hair a cm higher than usual. You left the house early, even though you were supposed to be in bed at that time. You looked so adorable and cute." "Ha ha," laughed the butler. "He should get back as soon as possible." Evening. Loman is in her room lying on her bed and says, all day she hasn't been able to get even one step closer to him. Is that really how it's written in the story? Maybe there's a way around the system after all, she thought. If she was 14 now, Muhan was about 17. He's so young, but he does so much hard work. She saw the sign beside him as usual, and there was a schedule. 1. Tidy up the mansion. 2. Manage the servants. 3. Receive guests. 4th, night patrols. Who would have thought he was on night patrol? Something rustled under the windows. Loman decided to get up to look. When she went to the window, she was surprised and couldn't believe her eyes. Who she saw there? Muhan returned from patrol, just what she couldn't believe. That he was still on patrol at night. She went out into the hallway, but it was very dark and cold. She wanted to meet him there or intercept him. As she walked down the hallway, she heard some sound, new and incomprehensible to her. It was clear, though. It was water dripping, and the floor creaked. For some reason it became hard for her to breathe. She began to gasp for air. This won't do, she thought. It was as if she were in a dark, closed room. Butler Muhan's room, washing his eyes and his hands with water. The butler sat on the windowsill near the window and said as he returned from work, I accidentally found a mouse that was about to break into the mansion. I should have asked for more money for such a job, he said. Looking up at the sky, he saw the first snowflake and said, Snow. Soon this mansion will be swallowed by a blizzard, the butler said. A bit of history from the author. A famous businessman born in the South lives in a mansion. Countless people are trying to infiltrate him, or make up reasons to get here, such as sending the most useless son in the family under the pretext of marriage, because somewhere in the mansion are hidden the great treasures of the North. It is said that the key to the treasure can be found in the mansion, for the treasure is his much-loved daughter, young Miss. Back to the butler's room. The butler said, Not the point. It's not time for that yet. He should check young Miss's room. Young Miss has been acting strangely lately, he thought, picking up a candle. He walked toward Loman's room. As he walked down the hallway, he noticed that the door to her room was open, and she was doing and behaving in ways that were out of character for her. She never left the room so late, thought the butler. Never snapped at the young master, and never tried to get close to him. Could he have missed something? Or had she really changed that much for something or someone? The butler ran and searched the hallway for little Miss. Suddenly he heard the word Mom. When he turned around, he saw a girl sitting on the floor. Walking up to her, he said, Miss, how good it is that nothing happened to you. Why did you leave the room? Why? Asked Loman. Why? Asked the butler, holding out his hand to her. He said, Come on, your hand. I'll walk you to your room. Loman keeps trying to get through to the butler named Muhan. She throws her arms around him again and tells him it's all his fault. She's been looking for him for so long. If it wasn't for him, she wouldn't be stuck in this damn mansion. The butler said, He's Muhan. He repeated the name Muhan a couple times. Taking the girl in his arms, he brings her back to the room, puts her on the bed, and Loman tells him that it was so dark and scary in there that she began to choke from fear. He hugged her too and said, Young Miss, everything will be fine. She had long since calmed down, but she was finally able to hug him. Young Miss, so what business were you looking for him on? Said the butler. And I've thought it over carefully, but they look identical. Most likely the mansion's lady maid's appearance was originally copied from her. Muhan might think she's a simple game character, but since she can't say anything about it, we'll have to hint. Let him know she's a real Loman and not a mere character. Loman got out of bed and said, He's back so late. Take her to the kitchen and she'll personally cook something. They walked into the kitchen. Well, as befits any game or story, Loman imagined a fancy table that she herself would be able to prepare various delicious appetizers that her lover would know. After he eats it all, he'll tell you that these are his favorite snacks. Is that Lolo? He'll think. But the reality is quite different. The delicious appetizers didn't work out at all. Everything caught fire, and it turned to charcoal. Loman thought that it was even harder to cook in the game than it was in real life. Miss, you don't know how to cook at all, do you? The butler said. If you wanted a snack, you could have just asked for it. Loman lay still on the cot and thought, Muhan, It's not like he knows about her favorite foods. Hope he doesn't throw up. Speaking of which, she's the older daughter of the owner of the mountain mansion. It seems she's heard a similar story before, the girl began to wonder. This is the same mansion that will one day disappear in a blizzard. A mysterious treasure. A bloody murder case. Young Miss began to ask questions. What role would you not choose for yourself? How strange. It's like the memories are blurred. What was she just thinking about? Could it be that the script caused the memories to be erased? Really, why is she playing the role of the villain and not connected to Muhan in any way in the story? While she was lying on the couch, she heard a knock on the window. The girl sat up, turned to the window and looked out, thinking, who is knocking there in the middle of the night? But wait a minute. She's on the second floor. Looking out the window, Loman saw some kind of monster. What is it? She was scared. This monster smashed the window with a hammer and started attacking the girl. Someone grabbed her and covered her mouth with some kind of cloth. She screamed, "Help!" I called for Muhan. He was in the kitchen. How come? Why didn't he come to her? Why? How noisy. He was newly hired, he had already lost one eye, but he still came back for young Miss. Except for the current problem. Young Miss, after all. Whose are you? Thought the butler, lighting a cigarette. The woods near the mansion. A carriage was carrying someone. Out of the carriage stopped, and soon a man got out and followed straight ahead. Finally he showed up. Saw your signal. What took you so long? The man asked. I apologize, master, said the unknown monster. Why are you covered in blood? He got rid of that guy back in the afternoon, the stranger said. But our boy monster said no. He was just struck by lightning, to be exact. He tripped over the branch the lightning struck and fell into the river, and then he was chased by wolves for 2 miles. Hanging on the monster's arms, Loman thought. She was very lucky after all. Anyone who harmed her would be punished by Mother Nature herself. And she smirked. The stranger said she just smirked. But the monster's boyfriend said that was impossible. He used a strong sleeping pill. The stranger approached the girl, and she thought that she should not panic and it was just a game. Leaning over and looking at the girl, the stranger said, Forget it. Hurry up and get her to a doctor. Perhaps the key to the treasure is hidden somewhere on her body. It's blown through, thought the girl. She's still more or less safe. Well, then she heard that they're going to rip out her belly and gut every inch of her. Threaten her father to tell him where the treasure is, said this stranger. Regardless of that answer, that girl is not coming back to him alive. After those words, when Loman heard what was being argued to her, her stomach, she screamed and shoved away from that monster guy with all her might. She managed to break free from his arms, and with all her might she tore off to run into the woods. As she ran, all her thoughts were that she was very scared and needed to run. She knew it was just a game, right? But if she died, she could go through it all over again. But right now it didn't matter. As she ran, the monster guy was almost catching up to her and telling her that she was trying to escape, but she wouldn't succeed. As long as she was running on the ground, she was able to get a good breakaway. But then, as luck would have it, the rocks started, and rocks are very difficult to run on. Her foot twisted and she fell over these rocks, rolling over and right into the bushes. "Move and catch her!" the stranger shouted. "Yes," replied the monster boy. The forest that is near the mansion is very strange. Once the fog descends, it's impossible to get out of here. The monster guy went into the bushes to look for Loman. He'd better go first. If he drags this out even a little longer, he'll never get out of here, the stranger thought. And he was already walking toward the carriage to get into it. He hoped that butler was more skillful. So many people didn't get to the eldest daughter, and he got her so easily, he thought. Enjoy your game of hunt. But while he was standing and reasoning, he didn't see that behind him in the carriage sat already a fellow butler with a dagger. The stranger said he would just sit quietly and wait for the hunter to catch his prey. But the butler grabbed him by the neck, and he said, "Dear guest, he will give him this," easily slitting the stranger's throat in an instant. The butler went to deal with the matter further. He stood on the rocks in front of the bushes where the girl had fallen and said he came as soon as he could. "But first, please be afraid. Just a little more, young miss, for he has yet to deal with the monster boy." Loman, sitting in the bushes behind a tree, thought she had succeeded. Of course, her elbows and knees were all wiped out. "Oh, and all my feet are bloody and also wiped out from falling on a rock and through all the bushes having run." She sat there and reassured herself that it was just a game. It wasn't real, and it shouldn't hurt her so much. But it felt like it was real. But it's not an easy game. It hurts so bad, she said. No one has ever treated her like this in the real world. She was wrong. She doesn't want to die at all. Ah, hell, said the girl, and all for a Muhan. Reaching upward, she noticed snowflakes falling. Is that snow? Thought the girl. It's summer now. It seems warm. The fog seems to be getting thicker. We have to get out of here fast, Loman said. She no longer remembers when it all started, but she is very afraid of getting lost in this forest. Fog so thick you can't even see the road. It seems to be starting up again in the dark places. She's starting to choke. When the fear reaches its peak, she can't even hold back the tears. After all, she's too scared, and she doesn't like to cry. She doesn't realize anything anymore. Too many thoughts in her head and actions. Muhan, why did he disappear so abruptly, but reappeared in this scenario? And even here he is ignoring her. The girl kept walking forward and talking. What if he really isn't Muhan? She thought. Realizing it only now, Loman noticed something glowing in the distance, and she walked towards the light. As she came closer, she saw a lamp of light. That's his lamp, Loman remembered. On such a dangerous situation she found herself in, a sudden ray of light in this forest, a trap to lure its prey. Loman swung toward that flashlight, and up in the tree on a branch stood the butler watching her, a trap that attracted a lost, frightened bunny when Loman approached this lamp. That monster boy threw his axe at it and the lamp shattered. It also attracted the wolf who hunts this bunny. He said he knew the girl would come to the light. Loman had only one thought, that she in such a small body, no, even in an adult body, she wouldn't be able to fight this monster. So she's going to have to fall into that trap. But she decided to try one more time to call the butler for help. She crossed her arms and begged, or rather pleaded, for him to save her. At the same moment, the butler was sitting in a tree watching the whole scene. He saw everything and heard everything. The monster guy didn't like that. He said, "Shut up. Don't you dare mention him. No one's going to save her." And he punched her in the face so hard that she bled. The butler boy, who was sitting up in the tree, continued to watch the whole thing for the time being. Only his eyes had turned yellow in color. After the impact, Loman flew down and hit her head on a rock. She was already in so much pain and fear, and she already realized that this was the end, the last of her leading before her eyes. It was her father. The monster guy swung his axe in front of the girl, clamping her eyes shut to avoid seeing it. She said her only name, Muhan. Only there was lost spring. The whistle of the axe through the air and the sound of impact could be heard. When the girl opened her eyes, she was covered in blood, but not her own. She felt very sick. Everything began to flicker. She opened and closed her eyes. When she opened her eyes, she saw the butler. He said to her, "Don't look." He took his cloak, with which he had been covered all this time, and covered the girl with it, saying that he apologized for his delay, young miss. He took her in his arms and carried her to the mansion. On the way he asked, "Who was that man whose name you just shouted? It must be someone important to you." Wiping the tears from the girl's eyes, he asked, "Still, who is it, Loman?" But most likely she was just dreaming about him. "Let's hurry home, she's very tired, she's in pain." She clung to the butler as if he were her boyfriend, even though she realized he wasn't. Butler's memories. He opens his eyes and sees a girl in front of him who asks, "Who else is there?" The girl reaches out to him and says, "Come on, your hand. Time to go home." And in the clearing sat he, the butler, with yellow eyes and a white cape. It was the first and last time he had ever been so intimate with the young miss. When he gave her his hand, at the same instant a wild desire to possess her arose, and the feeling overshadowed his goal of exterminating the hated Southerners. Earlier that morning, the butler had spent the entire night in Loman's room, sitting by the window. Young miss had not yet come to her senses, but the butler could not stand it. Went up to her, took her hand and said, "Young miss." He planned to watch you from afar while his desire gradually passed. "And kill you myself," said the butler boy. After all, the treasures captured by the Southerners are very important to him. He will not allow you to be harmed until he has them. But now his desires are intensifying again. He's like bewitched. He wanted to drive you into a situation that would make you choked with tears, and you could only rely on him for help. However, he is uncomfortable seeing her get hurt. While he's saying all this, he kisses her hand. He has endless thoughts in his head as she hugs him. And now, before she comes to her senses, he strokes her hand and touches his cheek, and tells her that because the only one who can hurt her is him. So this time you will pay a big price for bringing him home." Patting her on the head, the butler left the room. As soon as the butler left the room, Loman sprang up and said, "Save her, my soul! Why, he's Yander!" and screamed, "Aye!" That same morning, a little later, her future husband, a guy, walks down the hallway and speculates that he heard that the young mistress was almost kidnapped. As her future fiancé, he has to fulfill the mission assigned by the family, but his opinion was that she deserved it all. He'd have to pretend to care about her. When they knocked on her door, he said that he had heard that she had been kidnapped, so he had come to visit. Loman opened the door and he said, "Accept this thank you bouquet." The girl took the bouquet and threw it on the floor. She said, "Thanks, but you shouldn't have brought her bouquets," and slammed the door in his face. Closing the whole door, she thought she had ruined her mood of meeting this guy. She's not at all interested in the relationship between the groom and the protagonist, as Dream said. She has to influence the killer by any means necessary before the third act begins. So, the plan to capture the butler. She was optimistic. What ate with that yandere? She read a lot of romance. That's why it's necessary. Ha ha, laughed. There was a knock on the door, and a voice, realizing that she was probably embarrassed and ashamed to see him, said, "That's right. It was her future husband." They start talking through the door. He says, "But don't worry about it. He's not interested in her." And Lemaine thought, this one's still here and hasn't gone anywhere. By the way, I wanted to tell her that he had already chosen his date for the Academy's graduation party. Kindly don't pester your father to persuade him to invite you. He won't do that, Academy said indignantly to Lemaine. She'd also have to go to the Academy here. Once a year, the Southern Academy for Nobles holds a ball. The most popular couple of the evening will be honored by the Academy director. The young gentleman spoke so enthusiastically about the Academy that she had a rough idea of what it was like. He and I both attend the Southern Aristocratic Academy. They're on vacation, so the young master is staying at their mansion. At the moment she is a junior high school student, the young master is already in high school. She was surprised to find out that the butler was in his senior year of high school. Most likely her father had sent him here to keep an eye on her. But in addition, the real protagonist in her class, supported by a young gentleman. So she's the one he chose as his companion, Loman thought. Is this academy so laid back that anyone can get in there? The girl asked. When she opened the door, she said she wasn't interested in the academy and anything to do with it. As she stepped out of the room into the hallway, she saw there were those hundreds of maids again, each of them asking something. For example, "Young miss, have you decided to take a walk? Let's get your bath ready." Another one asks, "How good it is that young miss is recovering so quickly." And the girl kept wondering where all those maids had gone, but they were just waiting for her outside. Loman asked, "Do you know where the butler is now?" The maids replied, "He's at the master's right now discussing the events of last night. Tell him to prepare and bring her dinner to her room," and the girl closed the door. But these all 80 governesses rushed to her door and began to say, "Young miss, don't close the door." Her future husband stands there and hears all this and thinks, if she asks some guy to come at night, even though he doesn't love her, they are engaged. She is his fiancée. And I noticed it was getting dark. It was just morning, but it was already evening. "It's a strange way to spend a day in this game," she said. In the script she'd had time to read. The eldest daughter never left her chambers at night. Perhaps she can follow the non-story and do as she pleases, Loman thought. Great, it's a good chance to find the butler while everyone's asleep. To overpower Yandere, you have to instill a sense of security in him. Make him understand that she finally realized she was just crazy about him. When she first saw you, she knew you were the one. But she was shy around you, so she was afraid to make the first move. She'll ask her father to break off the engagement. If he doesn't, she'll just run away. They'll run away together. And then for some reason she, the girl, got angry and threw the rose on the floor and said, "What the fuck? Why did she even pick up that rose? That little playboy brainwashed her with his flowers." The palace. Who likes the senior lady of the mountain mansion? She needs to play the role well. If he finds out, he'll kill her, the girl thought. Obviously they have the same looks, but she's not his lady. Identical appearance, Loman thought once more. So why is he? Is it not him? By the way, why didn't he come to her, bring her something to eat? As she approached the door, she thought, wait, it's already dark outside. At the same instant, a butler was walking down the corridor. He was carrying a table on wheels, on which there were a lot of delicious things: cakes, pies, lemonades. Stopping the table, a guy came up to meet him and said, "It's that late? And you want to disturb her with appetizers? He's just hungry. Why don't you drop it all off at his room?" Leaving the room, Loman walked under the wall. "It's so dark. Where did the butler go?" she thought. Eventually, she went out to look for him. She starts crying when she's scared. The tears are flowing nonstop again. As she walked, she heard someone talking. As she got closer, she saw two guys standing there near the candy table. What are the two of them doing there together? She thought. The butler and her future fiancé. The butler's bringing her dinner in the middle of the night. He has to show this brat that he's still her future fiancé. The butler was already standing and imagining how he was about to slit the throat of the groom-to-be. He noticed a knife on the table he had brought with him, and the plan in his head had already matured, every detail before his eyes. But then he came back to reality because the groom brought up the fact that he doesn't like sweets and asked him to remember it for next time. Well, the butler kept thinking he could drown him in the lake. He's worthless, but still the son of one of the powerful aristocratic families. His hand reached for the knife, but still his thoughts were on why not just burn the mansion to the ground. At this moment, the Loman girl saw the butler pick up the knife. She imagined the worst that could only happen now. She rushed to the aid of her future bridegroom. Standing in front of him, she shouted, "Stop!" The butler pretended as if he understood nothing, saw nothing, heard nothing. The girl thought she didn't know what they had going on at the butler's place with that womanizer, but she couldn't let that yander kill everyone here. Her only way out of the situation was for no one to suspect anything. She screamed, "Who said I could touch her dinner?" The groom thought that's how she really wanted to have dinner. But why the butler is doing it is unclear. All the maids are untied. He decided to tell her, "Are you all right? You've been very strange lately. You used to give him all the sweets. Well, now you're fussing over a little thing like that?" Taking her hand, he said, and immediately felt some strange relief. "Are you possessed by someone, maybe a ghost?" Leaning over, her future fiancé said to her, "Hurry up and humor him like you used to." She thought they knew that young Miss was very much liked by the gentleman. Can't have the butler noticing anything strange about her. Well, the groom was really heartbroken when he saw her. As she pulled out of his grasp, she said that she had always cared for him after all, and thought she would get the same in return. But he chose another girl to partner him at the ball. Even said girl turned around with a hurt face. She had to make it look as if her patience had run out. She had given up, for she liked the lord, but she had not received reciprocation from him. A fine excuse for a young miss in love, she thought. But her fiancé suddenly shouted, "No!" That could explain her strange behavior, for people begin to notice everything. Then she turned to the butler and asked, "You can dance, can't you?" Butler, the assassin that's hiding backstage, of course he'll want to get on that lavish stage too. Before he gives his answer, he had a small memory, his only memory, when, while executing an assassination order, he asked one artiste to dance with him, but afterward he replied that he didn't know how. But the girl smiled and said, "She'll teach you, it's okay. You'll be her dance partner since she has no one else to go with. That's why she asked you to come to her room and discuss it in person. She didn't want to draw attention by hiding backstage, but she'll get him on stage and show him love, but also punishment." But she really needed him now, and he replied, "Okay." He leaned toward her and said, "Then please, young lady, teach him everything when they are alone in the room. Doesn't understand it all. Is it fear or is it something else after all? After all, they're too much alike." Loman pushed the butler away and said, "Forget it. It's too late today. Let's meet another day." But the butler grabbed her arm, leaned over and said in her ear, "It's too late. If you don't grab him tight, he might change his mind." And the girl had no choice. As long as he agreed, something had to be done. She took his hand, and they went to her room together, like practicing the dance. The groom-to-be shouted, "Wait, is he already her dance partner?" The butler turned around and walked toward him. The groom grabbed him by the neck of his shirt and said, "But you are only a servant. You are a poor orphan who is not wanted in the north. You must remember who you really are." The butler took his hand and pulled it away, saying to the young gentleman, "Something you are too wrong about, groom." Have felt the full force of the butler from his grasping hand. "Where did you get such confidence from, do you know? Why is it that your family is so prosperous and has such wealth? You're just a southern aristocratic thief." the butler said with a smile. As he did so, he squeezed harder and harder on the groom's hand. He screamed in pain and thought to himself how he knew they were thieves. The butler continues to hold his hand very tightly. The bridegroom thought about the fact that he would not let him go. What kind of monstrous strength is this? He would break his arm like this. But the butler was approached by Loman and put her hand on his shoulder to make him realize that he didn't need to do anything bad. The butler let the bridegroom go at once, and the bridegroom was very frightened. He was frightened by such power. Loman took the table on wheels and pushed it toward the groom and said, "Take it if you want it," and added that this butler had been with her for years. They were just servants, and he dared not reprimand him. The butler and Loman went into the room, while the groom remained in thought. After all, this is the butler. He is from the north. He had completely forgotten to check what kind of person he was. Is it possible that he is not good? "Hey, wait," the girl said. "The room is already in the other direction. Where are we going so fast?" The butler took her hand and led her to the other side of the mansion. "Butler," said she. Just then there was a noise somewhere. The girl looked around and thought, could it be that someone had broken into the mansion again? Would that sick Yander leave her again? At one point he let go of her hand and walked forward. The girl was surprised. She thought he was going to leave her now, but then he stopped, turned around and held out his arms to her. He said, "Come on," and the Loman threw herself into his arms. She felt like he was playing with her because he started stroking her head again. But she decided to remedy the situation and said, "Now that you've agreed to go to the ball with her, they can practice every day. But it's too late today and she's tired." The butler said it was just a joke. He was only playing along with her. The butler said, "Young miss, there is no need to use such methods on the Lord for the sake of his family. Young master will do anything to make your wedding happen." Breaking, she thought. Who would want to marry someone like him? It's easier to die. He only has room in his heart for treasure, not love. Isn't he obsessed with Yandere, a guy who's willing to fight for her? She stopped him and said that, by the way, she knew where the treasure was. "Young mistress, he doesn't have time to play treasure hunt with you right now," the girl answered him. "You think she doesn't know anything? She knows that the purpose of you being in this mansion is to bring the treasure of the Northern Kingdom back to your homeland. Thus, she distracts him from thoughts of murder. She can help him." Butler asked, "Helping him how?" "Young miss, you seem to be lying too much lately," the butler said. "And by the way, who are you really?" The butler took her by the neck and asked, "What made you decide to get so close to him with the butler all of a sudden? You can't let him go. What are you trying to accomplish?" he asked. The girl thought that he suspected her, and how scared she became. What would she do if he killed her? Why did she even get involved in going through a game where she could be killed at any moment? This isn't the guy she's looking for after all. But she can't get out of here now, she thought. You may think she's your old lady, but she was trying to play the part of someone you like. She has no one to rely on but him either, the girl said. You need treasure, and she can help with finding it. Why is he not like Muhan? Why can't he talk to her as nicely as he does? And then she heard the word that he agreed. Okay, why all of a sudden? He said he was just kidding. Of course he believes her. If she needs him so much, how can he say no to that? The girl thought he was joking again. He's always like that, though she was too scared to ask him about it. His mood seemed to have improved, but why? He didn't seem to suspect anything, so she could continue to pretend to be his sweet young miss, taking full advantage. The butler said it was quite late and asked her to show her to her room. They should talk about her plan in a more private setting, and held out his hand to her. There's still an eternity ahead, but he'll always be at her side. Always on her side. Okay, even though he looks so scary, he has a nice side, the girl thought. After returning to the room, Code Dream appeared. Ho 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 ho! Look who's still alive! That's really impressive, he said. He didn't think she was going to follow the basic plot at all. Don't plan on dying first. You seem to have fully gained the assassin's trust, the cat said. Loman got angry and grabbed the cat by the neck to pull him out of the painting, and angrily yells at him, What's he doing here after all this time? Maybe he'll set up that broken game by now. And the cat yells at her, Don't get so excited. He can only show up if you're making progress. Getting to the point, it looks like you've decided to team up with an assassin, the cat said. The scenario organizes the main quests based on your choices. By completing the tasks one by one, you'll get closer to the main goal and get the treasure. When Loman opened the book, she got a sign that said, Task D, Clean up the closet. Task C. Explore the mansion. Don't worry so much. She can do whatever she wants. Haha, replied Code. There are rewards for completing quests, for example. You can get a bonus that gives you leeway in the scenario. Either way, it will erase everyone's memory of it, Cat said. By the way, said the cat, you really want to get close to that butler so badly. Very much, thought the girl. He's very dangerous. Be careful you don't get tricked, said the cat. Loman said he considers her his young miss, not Loman, so we'll take care of her. But Cat said, look, he could be lying to you from the start. Why would he lie to her? She's already told the butler that she trusts him completely. He's on her side, that's what he wants. He has nothing to pretend. But suddenly Cat repeated, I get the impression he knows something. But Loman believed for the best. While researching the book, she found references to the main characters. In the book, she saw that girl next to her fiancé. At the same time, in her fiancé's room. Young master, you have finally returned. Where did you go out so late? Came a reply letter from that girl. He was waiting to give it to you personally. Sir, her letter, and holds out the letter. Get out, shouted the bridegroom. The house of the girl who goes to the ball with her fiancé Loman. The girl is writing a letter. Young master, did you receive her letter? Why have you so seldom answered her lately? How annoying. Suddenly the young miss saw the letter and took it away. What is to be done? Thought this girl. It's all because young master is always favorable to her. Miss got it all wrong. She should apologize to mistress for that. And so it was the morning of the next day. Loman woke up first thing in the morning and decided to do a D-level task, clean out her closet. So, how can cleaning out her closet help her investigation? Thought the girl. Going through her things, she thought, could this be where the treasure is hidden? Yeah, it doesn't look like it. This dress is pretty cute, though. She didn't even think about her outfits. As she was going through the dresses, she pulled back a hanger and saw that there were some books at the bottom. She picked one up and began to read. True Love of Southern Girls. The book was wrapped in a paper bag. Did someone really send this to her? There are two girls drawn on the cover. Something fell out of the bag, and it turns out there was something inside. A hidden history from the North. Opening this book, she began to read. According to the records, many people in the North have strong and sturdy bodies, and can also fight well. However, are restricted by the terms of their contract, and people from the North should follow some rules to be able to live their lives in peace. Hence the legend of bloodthirsty and warlike assassins from the North, and the only thing holding them back is a contract. When Northerners sign it, they are given the opportunity to— Why is the sheet burned exactly at the most interesting place? Thought the girl. It follows that the butler signed a contract with the owner of the mansion. The owner of the mansion. Is it possible that he looks like her father? She needs to hurry up. They end up getting something for the contract. But exactly, from the description, it's some kind of item. Could it be the same treasure? There was a knock on the door, and they said, Your appetizers. The girl asked, What's all the noise? In broad daylight outside the door, they replied, hoping these appetizers will appeal to your taste. Opening the door, she said she didn't like those appetizers. Don't waste your time on them. When she opened the door, she saw the girl sitting by the window, and a heap of roomers around her, offering to drink tea, to try some more. And they were the ones who had specially prepared cakes for her. Thank you so much. She had never had such delicious tea in her life, the girl said. Loman was dumbfounded when she saw the girl who was to go to the ball with her fiancé. But the servants, when they saw the mistress, and the mistress said, That's all. No one ran up. No one offered anything. It's not the same for her anymore. The girl said, Young mistress, it's been so long since she's seen you. I apologize. She paid such an abrupt visit here and didn't even greet you. That look. It seemed to be the girl in the description she had read. Young mistress! The maid shouted. This girl came to the mansion so unexpectedly. They insisted that she be escorted here specifically. She was going to wait for the young master outside, but they were so kind to her and invited her inside. The maids began to say at once that they were being polite. The lady's personal maid said that they take advantage of the butler not being around every time, trying to please the young master in every way possible. The eldest daughter of the mountain mansion, the young master's fiancée actually. The maid bent down and brought the tea to the girl. We made it especially for you. We didn't have time to make for another guest. Here is the hot tea. But Loman threw that tea right in the maid's face and said, "If you like this girl so much, you can get a job as a maid in her house." The maid shouted that she would talk to the master about it. "You're so kind. Deprived of your paycheck, you'll do any dirty work," Loman said. And then the maid was defended by this girl who came to sort of meet her. "No, she couldn't wait to meet you, so she insisted on meeting you soon," the girl said. "It's all her fault. She apologizes and doesn't blame the maids." "Miss, she thought the online talk about bullying you was just a rumor," said the maid of this girl who came to visit. And now this same maid addressed the Aquaman. She said they were doing everything for her good. If you hadn't abused her, perhaps the young master wouldn't have been so disgusted with you. They were trying their best to keep these rumors quiet so as not to harm the mansion's reputation, so that the master wouldn't worry so much about it. The maid leaned over to Loman and said, "You're not going to tell everything to the master, are you? Trust her. You don't want to have the reputation of an abandoned daughter-in-law," the maid said. And this time, when not everyone was having a showdown, the butler stood outside the window and heard everything. It wasn't surprising at all that the butler was standing there. But the fact that he had a gun was probably no longer surprising in this story either. "Well, girl Loman," she said. "No, she's sure to tell him everything," the maid said. "Didn't you realize what she just told you?" Loman took her hand and said, "You have said all right. You should welcome her warmly, for she is our guest. You're doing a good job with everything. Thank you very much," Loman said to this maid. "After all, she knows you were unprepared for her visit. Loman will be sure to spread the word of your kindness to your host." "No way. How can she say that?" thought the maid. "I mean, she has a temper and is aggressive. It must have made her mad." And the maid said, "Oh no, she meant not to say anything to the master. Thinks it would be right to do so. Master's head is always spinning when he's told about rumors related to the young miss." "Oh, that's right. You're awake already. Let her work on your bed," said the second maid. "Master will be away for a few more days, so don't worry about a thing, lady. She still has a lot to do," the maid said. And how it really happened, we'll tell you now. Why Loman's character changed so drastically. So when she went to the window, this strange bell rang in her head saying, "Warning, the main quest is on the verge of failure. Do not let the assassin destroy the mansion." And that's when Loman realized that the butler was somewhere nearby. And if he realized something wrong, the whole thing would fail. So she thought that if it wasn't for this quest, you can't let him kill everyone here. Though in reality she hasn't cared for a long time. That's why she's changed in character. "I almost forgot, our mansion doesn't exactly welcome uninvited guests," Lemaine said. "If you wanted to meet her so badly, you should have sent a letter requesting it. And whether or not you agree depends on her mood. Come home at once when you drink your tea," said Loman.